My full name is Danielle Krista Welbeck.
My name is Elias.
My full name is Wanipa Astrida.
My full name is Zachary
My full
Luke
name
Elliott.
that's on my passport is Tamilore Awosile.
So what is Black Atlantic?
So Black Atlantic is a multimedia project consisting of a musical concept album, short films, and an audiovisual concert experience.
And what is your aim with the project?
The aim of the project is to explore the themes of identity and belonging through the music of the Black diaspora. The project does this through incorporating samples from interviews that I conducted with 8 young Black people that were done in my hometown of London in the UK and here at Stanford. And samples from these interviews are woven throughout the music. So at 18, I moved 5,000 miles across the world from London in the UK, where I'd lived all my life up until that point, to here at Stanford in California. And as a result of that, how I viewed myself and how I viewed my identity was really flipped upon its head.
Why did you decide to embark on this project?
So my freshman year at Stanford, I lived here in Ujima House. And Ujima is the Black diaspora ethnic themed dorm, which focuses on the histories, issues, and cultures from across the Black diaspora. And the word Ujima comes from the Swahili word in Ujima, which means extended family. Growing up in London in the UK, I primarily thought of myself as Nigerian. My Blackness was obviously very important to me, but I would say that my Nigerianness was central to how I viewed myself and how I perceived myself and how I navigated the world. Now, when I came to Stanford, people primarily viewed me as the British guy, and maybe that's because I speak like this. Not maybe, it definitely was. And so that was kind of in direct opposition with how I viewed myself. I primarily didn't really think of myself as the British guy or as British beforehand, even though that was a part of my identity. The fact that the way people viewed me was at tensions with the way I viewed myself in terms of like my identity and where I was from kind of made me start to question and think more about these kind of things. In addition, I was meeting people from all across the African diaspora to a level which I hadn't previously been exposed to before. I was meeting African American students, I was meeting African international students who came straight to Stanford from the continent. I was meeting first-gen children of African immigrants who grew up in the US, and so much more. So this diversity that I was now exposed to living in Ujima, as well as the way that people viewed me being in tension with how I viewed myself, kind of started me to really question and think about my place within the diaspora and how I really fitted into the global puzzle of Blackness. So as a result of me questioning how I fit into the diaspora, inspired by me being in this new situation and me considering how I fit into the global puzzle of Blackness, I thought it'd be really interesting to investigate how people saw these questions of identity and belonging, both here at Stanford and also at home in London, 2 places that have shaped me and have really influenced how I see myself. I chose to explore these questions of identity and belonging through music because music is the key way in which I connect with my Nigerian ethnic identity and my British national identity. Music is a key way that many others connect with different aspects of their identities. In addition, the music of the Black diaspora is extremely rich. Music that we claim to be from one place has influences from other places in the diaspora, and there's a lot of cross-pollination. It's the same thing with people and their different identities. As a result of this, I thought it would be interesting to use music as the vessel to examine these questions of identity and belonging.
How did you go about this project?
So the first stage of the project was me interviewing my friends, both at home in London and here at Stanford, I interviewed 8 people in total. I was really intentional about trying to get people from a range of backgrounds from across the diaspora. Obviously, it would be impossible to capture the whole Black diaspora, but I didn't want everyone to be just Nigerian, because growing up in London, you know a lot of Nigerians, especially as a Nigerian. The interviews were all one-on-one, and that was intentional because I wanted to create a sense of intimacy where people would feel comfortable being vulnerable and sharing their true thoughts and emotions about these topics of identity and belonging, and sharing stories about their life and anecdotes from their journey.
This research method links my project to the field of sociology. Conducting qualitative interviews with participants is a central research method in the social sciences. In addition, the interviews address sociological topics of race, ethnicity, nationality, how people navigate identity, including their racial, ethnic, and national identities, the concept of the Black diaspora, and most importantly, how these identities were formed in relation to the society around them. In developing this work, I'm thinking a lot about the work of British sociologist Paul Gilroy, and particularly his 1993 book titled The Black Atlantic: Modernity and Double Consciousness. During the transatlantic slave trade from the 16th to the 19th century, the triangular trade route was used regularly. Enslaved Africans were transported from Africa to the Americas and the Caribbean. Raw materials were transported from the Americas and Caribbean to Europe, especially the UK, and manufactured goods were transported from Europe to Africa. All of this happening across the Atlantic and across the triangular trade routes. One of the legacies of the transatlantic slave trade and this triangular route was the transmission of Black cultures across the Atlantic, which created instances of cultural hybridity, that is, the fusion of Black cultures from different regions. As a result of this, in his book, Paul Gilroy proposes that the modern Black experience and modern Black culture cannot be defined solely as African, American, Caribbean, or British alone, but can only be understood as a Black Atlantic culture that transcends ethnicity or nationality. When the interviewees were talking about their experiences relating to identity, the influence of the Black Atlantic philosophy and way of thinking was clear, with one interviewee even explicitly referencing this text. As a result, when I was putting together the music for the album, I also wanted to embody this Black Atlantic philosophy and way of thinking. After conducting these interviews, I continued on the sociologist's journey and identified common threads and themes that came out from all the different interviews. Each song would address a different theme that came out through the interviews and use samples from interviews relating to that particular theme.
What was your approach to the music?
That's a really good question.
So tell me a bit more about the music in the project.
So my approach to the music in Black Atlantic was really for it to be a representation of a lot of different musical styles across the Black diaspora. So the music that you hear on the album, really I describe it as a genre-bending universe kind of centered around jazz, but it also draws influences from hip-hop, Afrobeat, reggae, and beyond. And you can often hear multiple of these influences on the same song, but also scattered across different songs in the album. And it's interesting because jazz, for example, is a Black American art form, and so is hip-hop. When you have Afrobeat, which is a West African musical genre, and you have reggae, which has its origins in the Caribbean. So you have all of these different musical genres from across the Black diaspora in conversation with each other on the 10 tracks of the album. And you can often find multiple of these genres on the same track, as well as these genres appearing and reappearing throughout the album. So there's this level of interdisciplinarity that exists through this fusion of genres on my project. I would say that the music on the album kind of embodies Paul Gilroy's theory of the Black Atlantic. And by drawing on all these different musical traditions from across the diaspora, the music in the album cannot be solely defined as African, American, Caribbean, or British alone, but it can only be understood as a Black Atlantic culture that transcends ethnicity or nationality. So I really wanted the music from the album to embody this philosophy because Something the interviewees express is that multiple places from across the diaspora, whether it be where they grew up in the UK or the US, versus their country of origin on the continent, have shaped their sense of identity and have shaped how they view their identity and also their sense of belonging.
Where is home to you?
Home? I definitely think of Ocean Grove as home. I think it's where my family resides. It's where a lot of my really close friends who I now consider family live. So I'd say that, and I'd also just consider the whole of Australia home. I haven't had the chance to go back to Nigeria like that, but that is still a part of home for me. But yeah, definitely Australia.
You've just heard a song I wrote called Home, which is the 7th track on the album. The bass rhythm, which is a variation of a 3/2 clave, the drum groove, the shaker and the shekere percussion instruments, are inspired by both the Afrobeat and Afrobeats with an S musical genres, which have West African roots. It's important to point out that the shekere is a Yoruba percussion instrument originating from Yoruba land in West Africa. The harmony which you hear on the keyboard draws heavily from jazz, which is a Black American musical genre, in its use of extended voicing incorporating sevenths, and its use of the sharp 11 chord extension in the 4 chord. In addition, the melody makes extensive use of chromatic enclosures, another common feature found in jazz. So here, we have West African musical traditions in conversation with jazz, which is a Black American musical style, to form a song which embodies this Black Atlantic way of thinking. This song, having its origins in multiple places, also reflects the words articulated by Agnes in the interview clip you heard at the start, in which she reflects on the fact that multiple places, both Australia and Nigeria, hold a sense of home for her.
Music was really intentionally crafted to make statements on these sociological questions of identity and belonging that the interviews are exploring. I'll give you an example. Take the track GSTQ, the lead single from the album.
So I feel specifically Black British. Like, that is the specific type of British that I feel. I do not necessarily feel British. Definitely don't feel English. That George's Cross is scary. I'll say football's coming out, but that George Cross outside of the football time is not. It's scary.
GSTQ stands for God Save the Queen. And basically, the aim of GSTQ is to explore the complexity of British national identity and belonging. It takes interview clips and samples from interviews where the interviewers are answering the question, do you feel British? On the musical side, the melody you're hearing is actually the national anthem of the UK, God Save the Queen. Now we reimagine the national anthem to switch it from something patriotic, something happy and glorious, as the words of the anthem go, to something which is the opposite of that. we reinvent the anthem to something which musically represents the complexities of British national identity as a young, black, and British person. So I chose to release the single on Friday, May the 5th. I chose this date because it coincides with the coronation of King Charles III, the new king of the UK. And I really chose it to provide a different narrative to the patriotic and joyous mood that really surrounds these occasions usually. In addition, you hear the samples of the interviewees talking about their emotions and their feelings regarding the question, do you feel British? And that's on top of the music, on top of the melody that is the anthem. This foregrounds black voices on top of this patriotic melody that usually represents the state.
Black voices and black people are usually an afterthought in the eyes of the British state. However, by putting these voices on top of the anthem, we are turning this hierarchy on its head. Overall, Black Atlantic is a project which uplifts the voices of young black people and gives a spotlight to the way in which they navigate their diasporic identities in the complex worlds around them. Black Atlantic is also an embodiment of richness, the richness of the diverse stories and the richness of the musical kaleidoscope that exists within the black diaspora.